Oh, I can hear a little something.
Oh, that's me.
So Jared said a minute ago, feedback again, and then it cut out, not sure if I'm talking at all, but it's letting you know, you all know, that was a minute ago. That was before.
So we're going to Zoom that?
What if we shut down our computers and just use this? The one in reverse.
We had that. I had my phone and speaker shut off. No, sorry.
I don't know. But also means the only. We land on.
To log in through Zoom.
What?
I brought my laptop, because we're logging in through Zoom.
We're on Zoom.
What if we just have one?
Just come over and sit like in your station or something when we want to do it. Like, what do you all, we raise
Or
our
I
hand.
can turn mine off, like say you're gonna talk, and I.
Okay, sure.
So they can hear Diane.
Can anyone watching hear me? Yes.
Yes, Diane, I can
Yes.
hear you.
Yes,
Delayed.
we can hear you.
Okay. People can hear us now. So they can hear her.
Only
She's
Diane.
off mute, so.
Right.
So.
So we just turn the mute on and leave it off until we come.
But it wasn't working on some of the others.
Only for me, it's important.
Let me cam on too. Cam off.
Okay, then Diane, mute yours.
Always your mic on.
Yeah.
So then now
Let-
who you
let me-
try?
The
Yeah.
mic on the.
Test, test, test.
laptop.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay, now you turn yours off.
again.
Everybody- is
Are you
yours
there?
working?
You hear me, right?
So why don't you give yours to the mayor? Put yours
Or,
up here.
or I can just scooch over there.
Yeah. Well,
We just put it here.
why don't you just,
She can run the meeting.
why don't you just, we'll just switch places and then we can stay social distancing.
I don't want to touch your stuff though.
Oh, well,
You know
all
what I
right, you
mean?
can sit by me then. Either way.
Is this your stuff?
Yeah, I'll get rid of that. I can move my computer over though.
Yeah, put your computer right there.
Yeah, it's wireless. You need the mouse, you can use it.
Okay, so let's close this. Yeah, see, this is the screen. I can't get, how do I get to that
Well,
screen?
very bottom.
I'm-
Go to where here is mute,
yeah.
and at the very bottom is the option, all the way at the bottom. Click that.
See, that's what I think it is.
Okay,
At this point, even if we can make the meeting work, I don't want this to
Okay, so now I turn my speakers up.
okay, yeah, now try it. I think
It's
you might,
working now.
that, she had the wrong setting on
Okay,
the
I
audio.
figured it out.
Okay, we're good.
It's time sensitive, we can always schedule.
I,
I think- I
I
think
will
she's got it.
actually say it was Tom that figured it out.
But we still won't hear the presentation. But that's the next step. We get your mics on, your speakers on, so there's feedback. Put your speakers down, go off.
Real low, yeah, just a zero.
Okay,
That should work.
can people hear me now? Someone from the studio audience?
Good.
Okay, are we gonna record? We're getting a little bit of feedback, but we think we're back in business.
Quick.
Do I need to recap what we covered so far? Okay, so the recording is on and we have had some technical difficulties. So I just want to recap some of the things that we covered so far, going through the agenda. During
This is mine,
public
right?
input, we did have Patrick Lamke speak about his retaining wall in the Holiday Heights addition. In the report for the mayor, we recognize firefighter EMT Ty Edwards for completing his probation and welcomed him to the Analaska Fire Department as a full-time person. The consent agenda had 2 items removed from it. Item F from judiciary, which was approval of the City of Onalaska deposit schedule, the forfeiture schedule. This item was removed because people at the Judiciary Committee meeting felt they didn't have the information enough ahead of time of the meeting to study it over. But everybody agreed tonight that it was fine and that passed. Under Administrative Committee, item I was pulled off of the consent agenda and further discussion took place. And this was eventually approved, but it was amended to state that the resident the amendment said that the resident could only foster 1 dog at a time. The,
Kim, we didn't really approve it. We haven't approved it yet. We were
that's
just,
where we left
yeah,
off.
yeah.
Okay, so this is where we left off.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this motion is on the floor with the amendment of 1 dog at 1 time. The amendment says renewable annually or to be considered for renewal annually. And just like reiterated that this would be for this resident at this address. And also with the understanding that if one of the homeowners' pets were to pass or leave the home for another reason, that the person would not replace that pet, which would then also bring them into compliance. So we were discussing this and we wanted to check with Tracy, who is the applicant, to see if these conditions were going to be amenable for her. So is there any chance that we can hear from Tracy? Tracy, why don't you give it a try and we'll see if it works.
Okay, I can hear now. Are you able to hear me?
Very faintly. So is it,
Okay.
whose computer is it coming
it's coming
from?
through mine.
Okay,
Is
try
that-
turning it up.
Is that,
Let me turn it up.
I turned my volume up. I don't know if that helps.
Okay,
No,
okay,
Okay.
it's all the way up.
Oops, sorry.
Okay, can you hear me better?
just faintly, we can hear you.
Can
Okay.
because I hear a lot better.
Can you?
Tracy, can you talk again?
Yep. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. So I heard the conditions, and that is fine. If we were to look at, if one of the pets that I own is 15, and if he were to pass, we adopt anybody that we are fostering, can we then look at redoing this process if it were come to be that I would want to foster
Mhm.
and keep?
I think the answer to that.
But that's your fourth dog or fourth pet.
Well,
So-
yes, because I have the 4 now, and I just want to foster the 1. And I
Right.
guess if it would come to be that this would be the situation in the future, if I can redo the process like we're doing now, knowing that I have to reapply, so then I could just do this again if that were to
I
be.
think that would make sense.
I don't foresee replacing the pet I have. I am kind of just interested in the fostering at the moment.
Alder Knott has a question.
Yeah, I think, and again, Tracy, let me know if I've got this wrong. But, based on the conversations last night, I believe what she's saying is one of her dogs is elderly and, you know, at some time, of course, all animals pass, and this one might be sooner rather than later. And if that were to happen, if she were to retain another dog, would she still be allowed to continue to foster? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, or would I have to redo this process?
Well, I think we're approving for the additional pet for whatever period of time we're talking here. That's my understanding. So it's a 1 year for the additional pet.
One of the conditions is that if for whatever reason she no longer had one of her 4 pets, the foster animal would take that 4th spot. And then if she wanted to exceed it and go for an additional one, she'd have to come back.
Okay.
Alder Burmaster.
Myself, sorry. My understanding was that she would only be able to foster 1 dog. So I
At
think
a
if she
time.
had 3 dogs and was fostering 1, that would meet what we approved. If she fostered 2, that isn't what we approved.
She has 4 dogs. or
But
4
we only approved to foster 1. You know what I'm saying? So like I said, so she had 3 dogs. She fostered 1. She wouldn't really need our approval for anything, but if she fostered 2, she would need approval because she's going over that 4. She would need to come back though, under the circumstances, because we only approved her to foster 1. We did not approve her to foster 2.
Okay, Alder Stevens, then Alder Knott.
So for a point of clarification, are we, does the amendment for the extra dog, is it specific to the dog? For example, what I don't know is, let's say the dog gets placed with another home in Maine, and then she's approached and wants to foster another dog in the course of this year. Is that dog grandfathered in with the year, and then would have to reapply if it was still there January 1st? Or so basically, I guess what I'm asking is, does this rule apply to Miss Antonowitz, or does it apply to Fluffy?
It's for the 5th pet.
Yes.
A specific pet?
Yes.
So I don't, the fact
Doesn't
that it
matter
was fostered or not is.
It doesn't matter if it was 5 pets or 1 pet, but it's the spot of the 5th pet,
Right.
the position in the household.
So if the specific pet is placed in a permanent home and another pet comes in for that 5th spot,
She's good.
will she have to go through that process?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's good for the year?
Yeah.
That's what I was looking to clarify.
If we agree on one, yes.
Yeah. So sorry, Tracy, we're just trying to make sure that we have it clear.
That's okay. I want to be sure I understand properly too. I don't want to
Okay,
run into
City-
problems.
City Administrator Eric Lindflesh.
The issue was discussed also in terms of the licensing of the pets. That is pet specific. they have 30 days to get that license. So this is not a blanket waiver for not getting your dog tag license. This would be a waiver for the number of pets that you're allowed in the house. Just keep that in mind.
I cannot, yeah, it's not me.
Hmm?
Oh, really?
I am, but I'm recording it.
Oh, okay, yeah, I will sit over here, because I can't. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
About 30 days and I just did not follow.
They would
like,
still,
feedback.
each pet, like say she fostered five dogs in 1 year, each one of those 5 dogs would still have to be registered if she had it
After
over
30
30 days.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
One of our questions, Tracy, was if having to ask for renewal each year was gonna cause a problem with the fostering organization. Is that part of your obligation to them?
I don't think so. It's very much up to me, what pets they have. They have a Great Dane breed and they have a Shih Tzu breed. So I would choose the Shih Tzu breed if approved, just because that would fit into my household better. So I think they're very open, and if I have to, I would know enough and ahead of time, so that I could certainly get through the process.
We promise it won't take as long the next time.
Do I have to remember to redo it every year, or do I get a notice?
You probably find out when you come to register your next, when you do come. to
Yeah,
do-
and I'll remember that it's January every year, because I have to come and pay for my dogs.
Yeah, when it's time to pay
Yeah.
the licenses, that would be when it was time to do it.
Okay.
Okay, so we have an amendment on the floor. Can we vote on it? Does everyone remember what the amendment is?
Yep.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Okay, so what does that make it, 4-2? Motion passes 4-2. Okay, now we're back to the original motion, to approve the request for the waiver with the amendment. All those in favor, please. Oh, I'm sorry, discussion. Sorry, Alder Stevens, a second time tonight.
Thank you. So I'd like to point out that I think this is the second time in a million months that we're discussing dog policy. I have had commentary from a constituent expressing displeasure. This constituent was actually grandfathered in, so she was okay with it, or in her case, but did not like the ordinance. And if this is going to pop up and be a reoccurring thing, I think we need to ask ourselves, is the policy too restrictive? I think as a municipality, we have to draw the line somewhere, so you don't have a crazy guy that has 20 dogs that all the neighbors can't stand. But maybe we're a little too restrictive, or we should have a policy that lets responsible pet owners handle the pets that they can handle. And then we take a more proactive approach against the pet owners that are not responsible animal keepers. That's not particularly germane to the motion, but I'm just kind of pointing out that I hope that this doesn't become a regular thing, and maybe we should revise the policy.
Thank you, Alder Stevens. Alder Knott?
Yeah, just real briefly, this was, when this last came up, was some of the comments I had at that time too, kind of along the lines of what Dan's talking about, was that we already have ordinances and laws actually against animal abuse, nuisance animals, things of that nature. So I'm not so sure choosing an arbitrary number of how many people can have. There are probably some people who can't even handle one, and then there are some that can probably handle 6. And as long as they're taking care of the animals appropriately and they're not being a nuisance, I won't have an issue with it myself. But it's not germane initially to this, specifically to this motion.
Thank you, Alder Knott. Alder Wolf?
Thank you. First of all, am I supposed to use my wireless or not?
No.
Thank you. Just want to make sure. Regarding the word arbitrary, this was not an arbitrary number. I think staff did a lot of work, and they looked at what about municipalities also had, and we were, I believe the verbiage was overly generous, and we have been. And as someone who has worked with staff for the past 20 years on and off with property maintenance, fielded more calls than I ever, probably taken more by time than I ever care to admit. It has to do, and I agree with you, Stephen, there's some people who can't handle one pet. This was looked at very closely by staff, and the recommendation was passed, I believe, unanimously by this council in the last few months to go down to a total of 4. And I think it's good reason, and that's something that I still support, because when we look at property maintenance and hoarding and such, there's some really serious issues out there that our staff has had to take on, and it takes a tremendous amount of tax dollars to enforce that. So this is why I did support going down to the 4. So.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve the request with the condition. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Okay, motion is approved. Thank you. Now we'll go back over to non-consent agenda item 8. Alder Stevens.
Thank you, Your Honor. Under item 8A vouchers. The following is a list of monies expended since the last common council meeting dated December 8th, 2020. These payables include a percentage 40.8696 in 2019 compared to 42.343 in 2020 of taxes collected through December 31st, 2020 to the taxing entities. And the total is $14,162,779.87. And I move for approval. Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Olson to approve the vouchers. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Under item 8B, authorization to proceed with an application for a state trust fund loan on the 2021 capital projects that are not eligible for general obligation bonds in the amount of $253,388. This was on the non-consent agenda. We did not have a finance and personnel meeting due to technical difficulties. So before I make a motion, I'm wondering if maybe Fred would be able to speak briefly on what we're voting on.
Okay, yeah, the Board of Public Works, when we approve the, Board of Public Works, we approved the capital project, and after discussion, city engineer, Jerry Walker, and, financial counsel, from Curls and Brady, Bridget Keating, and I had a discussion on the following items that did not meet the criteria to go into the bond market. Investment we do in state trust fund loans, and they are as follows. Project number 6 was a fiber cable between the public facility library, which is $100,000. Project number 49, which was for 2 Mark SWAT cars for $129,088. Number 54, the police department, $24,300. They total $253,388.
Thank you, Fred. I'll make the motion to approve item 8B as per the agenda.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Wolf. Is there discussion? Not seeing any discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously to authorize the application for the state trust fund loan. Alder Stevens?
Under item 8C, authorization to proceed with financing timetable. Like item 8B, this was not under finance and personnel, there was not one, so I will request for Mr. Bueller, please give a brief presentation.
Okay, page 25 of your agenda is a timetable that we are looking at approving as we move forward to the 2020 capital project listing. Pretty self-explanatory what we're going to be doing in January, preparing for the non-council and getting back to the more resolution. All the way to the 9th of March, and the county council will award the resolution as a result. So there's so much laid out timeline now to going into the bond market as relates to the 2021 capital projects that we approved back in December. I believe.
What page do you think that is? Because I,
That is page 25 of the common council page on the bottom.
It's not in our
that's in
packet.
the middle of the,
Because we had
You gotta
the
pay it on.
schedule of fees, and I think that might be the whole
Oh,
yeah.
oh, well, yeah, could be. But anyway, it's called the City of Alaska, and it's has Baird in the upper right-hand corner.
I don't believe it's in our packet at all.
I don't think it's
No,
either.
I saw it.
It was
Well,
on the
this
F&P
is
agenda.
9A.
Yeah, it was
Yeah, I
about-
think it was in FMP if you have that.
And when I went on the F&P to look at the website to pull it off, all the attachments are pulled off the website, so.
It's item F7 on the agenda. I can pass that around if anybody-
I have it too.
I have it. I have it.
Should I just read it quick and then
Yeah, why don't you just summarize it for the record?
you want a summary, or it's about 12 lines?
Use your judgment, Dan.
All right, I'll just read this off on the record. January 6th, POS Alaska Disclosure Questionnaire. January 19th, OSDQ Request for Letter Due from the City. January 28th, POS Draft of Disclosure Council and Bond Council for review. February 3rd, Finance Committee considers Plan of Finance. February 4th, POS comments due from Disclosure Council and Bond Council. POS draft sent to Moody's Investor Services. February 5th, draft POS sent to City, Brad Vega, and the support anchor for review. February 9th, City Council considers initial resolution. February 12th, POS comments due from City, Brad Vega, and the support anchor, updated POS sent to Moody's. February 15th, due diligence call with Disclosure Council and Baird. February 16th through Wednesday, February 17th, Moody's conference call scheduled. February 19th, final PS comments due from Disclosure Council, updated POS draft sent to the city for final review. February 24th, final POS comments due from the city, Moody's ratings received. March 1st, POS printed and distributed. March 9th, council considers award resolution. And then the final is a to be determined settlement date. I'll make a motion to approve that.
Thank you. We have a motion by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Olson to approve the financing timetable. Any discussion? All those in.
For discussion,
Sure.
I
Can you do it backwards?
could.
Okay, I think we'll pass on that. All those in favor of the timetable, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Item 9, Board of Public Works.
Board of Public Works, A, review and consideration of installation of retaining wall within right-of-way at 1593 East Young Drive. It was the recommendation of Board of Public Works to approve the agreement.
And you make a motion.
And I'm sorry. I make a motion to approve the agreement and make a motion to approve the agreement.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Knott. Is there discussion? Alder Wolf.
Thank you. I've since talked with Jared Holter regarding this topic. And he and I talked, I didn't think that much time to talk, I would say at great length what we've done. If Jared would want to weigh in on this, he is certainly welcome to. He said that he would be willing to if anyone had any questions. I'm coming forward with an amended motion. And my amended motion is, and Jared is amenable to this, that the grantee, Mr. Lamke, will submit a drawing or a sketch showing length and height to be approved by staff prior to construction. Block will be stained a mutually agreed upon color, and also require the grantee to plant a bush every 15 feet in front of wall. And that's my amended motion.
Okay, we have an amendment by Alder Wolf. Is there a second?
I'll second that, but I'd like to reserve the time.
Okay, motion by Alder Wolf, seconded by Alder Stevens. Under discussion, we'll go back to Alder Stevens.
I guess my question for Alder Wolf on the amendment is, I'm assuming that there's some sort of purpose to this, so we know what this looks like, that we don't leave it open-ended and we can build a 200-foot wall or something to that effect, right?
Yes, well, due to our code, the height cannot be 6 feet anyway, but I know when Mayor Kim asked the question at Board of Public Works last week about the height
One
and
or
such,
two
there was like some terracing, and I personally didn't get a real clear picture what that was going to be. And I'm not looking at Mr. Lamke having to go to an architect and spend $500 and get it drawn up. I'm just looking at a simple sketch drawing. He could just sketch it out like this is what he looks at it to be, and submit it to staff. It does not have to come back to council. This is what is very typical at Plan Commission when things are then moved to staff, and it's just more of an internal thing. And it's just really just to have a heads up, what is he looking to put on the city of Onalaska's right of way? And the length of this retaining wall is looking to be maybe 60, 70 feet long. And Jared had suggested that, and I introduced this to Jared. My question to him directly was any of this too much of an ask? Because I certainly was not looking for this to be burdensome to Mr. Lamke. I support this project totally, but I think when Jared suggested doing a planting like every 15 feet or so in front of the wall, that would help break up that monotonous large wall. So that was the intent.
Thank you. Alder Olson?
I guess I'm confused as to why we're spending so much time discussing this. It's what we have a city engineer for, isn't it?
Well, it's not in the agreement anywhere. And we put conditions on things all the time. So it's our city property that the homeowner is looking to put something in the city of Onalaska's right of way.
Well, normally we would approve something from the city planning department, wouldn't we? After they gave the recommendation to us, instead of us getting involved in things like this all the time, or am I off base?
I don't think this came from the city planning commission. This was
Board of Public Works.
request of the
I
property.
understand
City
that,
property.
but then Jared was involved in it, wasn't
Yes.
he? Okay, okay. Then I guess I don't understand what all the extra comments are. I mean, what is the problem? Am I creating something that I shouldn't be creating, or what? Or it seems to me that we're making this really difficult for a long-winded discussion, but maybe it's just I'm not aware.
Thank you, Alder Olson. Alder Knott?
So, I guess this is to make it clear, before I make my comments, I will support the agreement as written. Undoubtedly, I guess I'm hoping to hearing potential amendments, but I definitely agree with this. Because having spoken to Mr. Lamke, he had stated to me that he was fine with the color.
Right.
And some of the other constraints that we placed on it. But in a more general, I I guess, overview, and then now with some of these amended proposals, I do have concerns about adding to a project like this or any future permitting proposal based upon our own personal likes or dislikes, either at the staff level or at the elected official level. Because if we go down that path, I can make an argument that we're kind of going into something that's very Kafka-esque, meaning that we're adding unknown bureaucratic requirements that are not listed inside the ordinance. And that's where things get very, very chaotic and confusing for any permit applicants because they don't know what the process is going to be anymore. We have what's listed in the ordinance, and then it's going to go there, well, this person wants this, and that person wants that. And that's where, to me, it gets very, very, very complicated, and I do have issues with it. You know, the newest one now, I guess, would be the bushes. I'm going to have concerns with that because we're adding an additional cost that is not in the agreement to upon Mr. Lamke's shoulders, that now he has to also pay for bushes, as well as paying for what he's already agreed to with, okay, I'll go ahead and stain it. He's agreed to do that. But I don't know how much bushes are going to cost. He probably hasn't considered that yet. So we could be creating conditions where Mr. Lamke is saying, I can't do it. You keep adding to the cost, I can't do it. And I just don't see where it's necessary. I would have no problem with the proposed amendment with him having to present a basic design, if you will, to make sure that it's compliant with the agreement and our construction standards. So that'll be about it. I just don't like to keep adding additional requirements based on personal preferences. I think it makes it hard for the staff too, because if folks are going to constantly add and change, how do they plan? So if we want to talk about changing the ordinance, we can have that discussion. But that's my own personal view.
Okay, I'm gonna assume that Eric was gonna say what I was gonna say, so I'm gonna call on Eric.
Jared Holter, not James Dean.
Okay. Jared Holter.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Jared Holter, you have the floor.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very faintly.
Very faintly. How about this? Is this better?
Better.
Okay. I did talk to Mr. Lamke about the various items, and he was okay with the sketch, the rudimentary landscaping of the bushes and the staining. So I did discuss it with Mr. Lamke previously, just as a point of information.
Thank you. And I was gonna add that if we were just having staff handle it, staff would just say no, because citizens aren't allowed to build retaining walls on city right of way. So the reason we're discussing it is because a citizen is asking to do something that is not normally allowed.
Oh, I understand that.
And I think that's the reason why we're getting into some of these conversations about what the retaining wall should look like, because it is going to be on city property.
And you'll be paying the city for that privilege. So I just, again, I know I mentioned last time on this, in the Board of Public Works, that I just think that we should be looking at the application. There are construction standards, and we should be just given an up or down vote on whether or not we agree that it can build a retaining wall, and leave it at that. However, in this particular case, the citizens already agreed to some of these conditions, so I am not going to oppose that. But I am very concerned that we're going down the path of each individual that gets to see the project gets to decide, well, I want to do this too. And that to me is chaotic, and there's no way anyone can plan what can possibly happen.
It's not a zoning issue, it's a right-of-way issue.
Thank you, Alder Knott. Is there any other discussion?
Your Honor.
Alder Stevens.
2 points. One, if there's damage to the retaining wall, will the city be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep? And I guess the second was to respond to Alder Knott. If the city is its entity that owns the property, if I have a property and I agree to let my neighbor do something to that, and I have 150 conditions for that, that's my prerogative if I want to let that person do that. And if that means We're down across the street from a park and we want it to look nice. I think that now is the time to have a discussion, and I think that it's reasonable, and if it's already been discussed and agreed to, I don't think that there's a problem with the amendment.
Okay, so Amanda, can you verify that, I don't think that agreement specifically states maintenance and upkeep of the wall where it resides in the city right away.
So if somebody crashes into it, who takes care of it?
I think it's his wall on our property, that's the way I have it.
I don't know that it's clear.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
Under section 1 is Vanguard Ram's licensee. Vanguard Ram's licensee, the license to license property for the purpose of erecting and maintaining.
Okay, number
It's in
one.
there.
Bill, a follow-up question, if I could?
Yes.
If Mr. Lamke were to sell the property, then would the buying, the new homeowner then be responsible for that wall as well?
Amanda?
Is that like in,
No agreement.
So is it transferable to the new owner, I guess is,
does the responsibility transfer to the new owner?
well,
I don't know if you can.
with the lease, or, you know, for the, I mean, that's basically what it says, the lease property, with the lease transfer to a new owner. I'd like to hope that it would, otherwise he wouldn't be able to sell the house very easily when that time comes.
I think Amanda's verifying that.
Can I ask if this can refer back to the board of appeals?
The whole thing? Yeah, he's not gonna build yet anyway, so. So do, we have a motion and an amendment, so procedurally, how do we extract ourselves? Withdraw both and then refer it?
So I made both motions and
withdraw my second.
amendment. So I mean, both motions and the sec, so I retract mine.
Okay, so the motion and the amendment have been retracted. The city attorney has requested that this matter be referred back to Public Works.
I move that we refer item 9A to the February cycle for Board of Public Works.
Okay, motion by Alder Wolf to refer to Public Works. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Tom Smith, and I think that will be fine for Mr. Lemke because he wasn't gonna start building that anyway, so. Okay, that way we don't have to continue on with this conversation. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Okay, all in favor of referring it to Public Works, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. We will take it up again at Public Works, work out the detail, and then hopefully it'll go a lot smoother next month. Okay, item 10, report from the city administrator. Eric.
Gonna try to unmute and we'll do speakers. Before I do the introductions, it should be all right if during the presentation, you mute your microphones.
Point of order, are we not on item
10. Oh, am I on the wrong one?
No.
I'm on 10, report from the
10A.
city administrator.
I might.
Are you on the amended?
You have the amended one? Is that amended one that came
I
out?
got on that other one because you were looking for that F&P paper. We're on an amended agenda. This meeting is not going
You have the
very
amended, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Okay.
If anyone didn't notice, our meetings are not usually like this. Yikes.
This has been a real clunky one.
Okay, Eric, what are we doing now?
Or Rob.
Before we do introductions of Rob, it should work if we turn our mics off during the presentation to avoid feedback. Then you should be able to turn the sound up to hear the presentation. Rob will be sharing the screen if all goes well, knock on wood. And we should be able to see then his presentation if we listen in.
Okay. Well, welcome, Rob. Sorry for all the technical difficulties. Hopefully, we're going to get to see your presentation.
Well, that's quite all right. So first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you faintly.
All right. We're in business. I'll try to speak up. You know, I gotta yell pretty loudly here from Milwaukee to reach you in the cross, but or in Onalaska. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. My name again is Rob Henkin. I'm the president of the Wisconsin Policy Forum. The Wisconsin Policy Forum, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a fiercely nonpartisan, independent, nonprofit policy research organization. We've been around for more than a century. We recently changed our name as a result of the merger between the Milwaukee-based Public Policy Forum and the Madison-based Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance. But both of those organizations, WisTax was around since 1932 and the Public Policy Forum since 1913. So what we're in the business of doing is doing objective, impartial policy research that's really designed for you. It's designed to give policymakers access to independent, objective policy research that hopefully will drive more informed and more data-driven decision-making in local governments, school districts, and at the state capitol. So I'm going to share my screen, as Eric said, and run through. I know that you have the report and the executive summary in your packets. I also know that this has been a long meeting, and so I'm going to very quickly go through my slides. What I really want to do is hit the highlights of the report and then leave plenty of time for you to ask any questions that you may have. So I am going to share now. And I'm hopeful that you can all see my screen, and Eric, I can see him nodding his head, so that's a good sign. So let me go into
Like the first thing that went right all meeting.
There you go.
Where were you earlier?
We
There
should
you
have
go.
had you at the controls.
So this is a report cover. Something in Common is the name of the report. As I think you're all aware, this report actually was released in mid-December. You are actually the first of the local common councils and village boards that I will be presenting this to, but just for your information, I'm already scheduled for Village of Holmen on Thursday, City of La Crosse on February 2nd, and also working out dates to present this to the La Crosse Area Planning Commission or Committee, as well as the county board. So
Oh, jinx.
His froze up.
Oh, no.
Yeah, he's frozen.
We could refer him to the Public Works meeting also.
Yeah, I would think so. Uh-oh, here we go.
The aliens.
I apologize. Can you hear me again? That was my payback, because that was my internet that just went haywire. So hopefully that won't happen again. But let me go back to where I was and we can get on. Hold on one second. Okay, again, my apologies, but hopefully that should not happen again. So again, these initial meetings were attended by representatives from each of the communities. Consensus was established to conduct a full study of the broad range of service sharing options. There were several meetings along the way. Your chief was just a pleasure to work with. Chief Goody, and the chiefs were involved in several meetings as we went through this process. There was also extensive review, not only by the chiefs, but by a larger group of stakeholders, including administrators and others. So it was a very inclusive process. And I want to say we've done several of these types of studies throughout the state of Wisconsin. And I just want to commend all of you because this was one where there was real willing participation by all of the parties. Clearly, nobody has taken any positions on any of the options that we ended up fleshing out. But it was just very impressive to see the type of collaboration among the 5 chiefs and among really the whole set of stakeholders. This is an overview of the participants in the study. So it's important to point out that many of the fire departments and EMS agencies in La Crosse County, plus the city of La Crescent Fire Department, took part in the study, but there were a handful that didn't. Campbell is one, notable just because it's in your neck of the woods. But this shows you who the participants were in the study. And there are some options that clearly, if you were to seek to implement them, we would suggest that you include potentially some of the municipalities that did not want to be included in the study. But in terms of what we explored, we really limited it to the agencies that you see on this slide. What this slide is showing you, again, are the location of the fire departments for the study participants. And then this box is very important in terms of the analysis that we did, because really one of the keys that we were looking at was the capacity from each of your stations to field an immediate response to an EMS or a fire call. So we can see on the one hand, for the 4 La Crosse Fire Department stations, a very healthy level of full-time 24/7 firefighters / paramedics assigned 2 shifts at those stations. Your department, again, having 4 people, having a goal of having 4 people at the station at all times at an EMT level of EMS service, puts you in pretty good shape. Where some of the other departments are a little bit lacking, but also, mind you, they have much lower volumes of service calls, are the remaining departments in the study. Holmen has a 1 with an asterisk because they actually field 2-person full-time station shifts during the day and rely on paid on call at night. But as you know, based on your department, some of the departments employ a mix of full-time staffing and paid on call. La Crosse, really exclusive full-time. Some of the smaller departments, exclusive paid on call. You are obviously a mix. And again, from our perspective, we see that as a healthy thing. Individual communities need to determine for themselves, based on their call volumes, based on their service level expectations, what their appropriate staffing framework should be. Why did we find that there was a need to at least explore some options for enhanced services? I'm going to run you through a few reasons in these next few slides. First of all, in terms of population growth, this is a growing region as a whole, a growing county as a whole. As you can see, the population growth is obviously greater in the jurisdiction served by the Holmen area department. Population growth in Onalaska is certainly substantial. As a whole, as we looked at the area covered by the study, about 5.9% growth over the last decade. What is perhaps most significant is the fact that the population of individuals over the age of 65 is growing. And these are projections that I'm showing you here from the State Department of Administration that shows the extent to which there is projected to be growth in the senior population over this time frame. Now, why is that important? Obviously, because individuals over the age of 65 tend to be larger users of emergency medical services than younger people. So this may have a bearing on future growth in calls for service. We have seen these call volumes growing at a faster pace than the population has been growing. That may be attributed to a number of reasons. Are your nursing home and institutional populations growing? Is there greater commercial development, which means you have more people in La Crosse County during the day, perhaps, particularly in the eastern, the western part of La Crosse County, or is it just because there simply is greater propensity for individuals to use 911, which probably isn't a good thing. Regardless of the reasons, we can see how these call volumes have grown in just the last few years. And that is really the number one most pressing issue why really when we look across the departments, each of you has some need to consider service enhancements, which then begs the question, if all of you need to consider enhancements in service, might you be better off from both a cost perspective and a service quality perspective to try to collaborate on some of those enhancements instead of having each of the independent departments go their own way. Finally, when we look at response times, which of course is a key indicator in terms of the service you're providing, as you can see for the La Crosse department, for your department, very healthy response times. There's no real gold standard here. When you look across the state for EMS responses, the average, and again, mind you, this is a mix of both urban and suburban and rural departments, but it's about 8 minutes. The standard tends to be for a suburban area like Onalaska, if you're within 6 minutes in terms of the time the call comes in to the arrival of the first responder on the scene for at least 90% of your calls, you're doing okay. So that gives you a little bit of context. What this tells you is that, again, for some of these departments, arguably there could be some improvement, and that's another rationale for exploring some staffing changes and some collaboration. We are actually, in terms of your paramedic response, yours is the first community that we have investigated where you are using the outside ambulance service, Tri-State, of course, to provide your advanced life support and leaning on your fire departments and your EMS agencies to provide basic life support. We think that's a very interesting model, and again, one that is well suited to your service characteristics. That said, outside of Zone 1, which is La Crosse, in terms of Tri-State's ability to respond, potentially here, there could be some rationale for improvement. Now, of course, in the cases where you're seeing a higher response time here for Tri-State than, for example, for your fire department, it's very important that that first responder is getting there more quickly than the times that you're seeing here. That said, and this is really particularly for zones 3 and 4, certainly looking into some ways to try to improve these is warranted. Finally, my last background slide before getting into nitty-gritty, this is the per capita operating expenditures for the 5 fire and EMS agencies in question. And so why do I put these numbers up here? It's not to try to comment on whether any of you are spending too much or too little. But very clearly, one of the challenges as we start to think about how these departments might be able to consolidate on service enhancements, part of the challenge here is that you're all paying for different levels of service. And so clearly for the smaller departments that don't have heavy call volumes, for one to suggest that their per capita spending should start to approximate what Onalaska or La Crosse is spending would probably be unrealistic. At the same time, perhaps some concerns from La Crosse and perhaps from you that, you know, if your citizens are spending more, you shouldn't necessarily be subsidizing mutual aid to these other communities. So it's sort of a balancing act. The fact that there are these divergences is not unusual, and it's not necessarily a huge barrier to collaboration, but it's certainly something to be aware of. And as I start running through the options, you'll recognize that. So as we crunch the data, as we look at all of this information, there were a few key observations that sort of guided the rest of the study. One that, and this isn't reflected in the response time data, but I think this goes virtually across the board with perhaps the exception of La Crosse, that there are departments that have sufficient capacity to respond to normal conditions, but they may indeed be particularly stretched thin during times of high call volumes. I've already touched upon this, but it's the growth in the Holmen area, particularly in the northern part of that service jurisdiction, that without question requires consideration of added fire and EMS capacity. And in some respects, that's a decision that the Holmen area representatives are going to have to decide for themselves. But there is an impact on everybody else to the extent that the Holmen area department is not able to respond sufficiently. That could potentially have an impact on your department, for example, in terms of its need to respond and provide mutual aid. We observe that there is a lower level of mutual aid in La Crosse County than we have seen in other regions. There may be a variety of reasons for that. But we also would observe that there is a full-time, very well-resourced department in La Crosse, and that potentially the other communities are not making as much use as they could of that capacity from a backup perspective. And again, if there was just a higher level of cooperation, and we're going to talk about issues like potentially looking at things like closest unit response or automatic aid agreements, that possibly those might be examples where arrangements could be worked out for the other departments to do a more, I don't want to say a better job, but a more thorough job of tapping into that well-resourced department. I said that we believe the two-tiered EMS response works well, but again, response times could be improved in the East. I think across the board for each of the departments, including your own, that is using part-time paid on-call staff, that's just becoming a growing challenge. In many respects, COVID-19 has exacerbated that challenge, but even pre-COVID-19, we're observing, and this is really across the state, greater difficulty finding staff who are able and willing to be part-time firefighters and first responders in communities like yours. Finally, the fact that the three larger departments, La Crosse, Onalaska, and the Holmen area department, are considering new stations, the fact that the existing station in Shelby needs major repairs, does create some opportunities that I'll get into in just a moment. So that's a summary of observations. Just in terms of, again, where there may be barriers to enhanced service sharing. So I've outlined some of the opportunities. Because there's a wide variation between the departments and staffing models and funding, and because service sharing may require a degree of standardization, there's a chance that it may not benefit all departments equally. So that's a challenge. Sharing and consolidation in the western part of the county really hinges on whether the suburban communities wish to pay more to approach a full-time level of service. Yours is the community that really has that hybrid approach, a pretty equal mix of full-time and part-time staff. To what extent each of you wants to move more toward that middle ground or even further toward the La Crosse model, I think is just a key question. Conversely, again, to the extent that the rest of the region doesn't start moving more toward that model, La Crosse may be wary of subsidizing the cost if it does have to provide enhanced mutual aid. So I want to just now briefly look at the options that we laid out. We presented 3 tiers of options. Tier 1 was the most basic. We labeled it enhanced functional service sharing. It encompasses options like setting up a joint training mechanism, whether that would be housing training in the La Crosse department, and having that larger department coordinate training for all of the departments in the region. It could be creating a separate training bureau. There are options there. Getting together in terms of those departments that rely on paid on-call staff to do joint recruitment and retention, so that you're not pirating staff from each other, so that you're trying to standardize pay scales. Things like that might hold some potential. Getting together to do EMS case management to try to address those growing call volumes, not only by adding staff, but by perhaps managing the heavy users in particular of EMS and of 911 calls through case management. This is something that actually is starting to be implemented throughout the state. It might be cost prohibitive for your department alone, for example, to hire an EMS case manager, but perhaps a way to collaborate is to hire 1 or 2 EMS case managers who could play that role in the entire county. And there may be other sort of smaller scale opportunities to come up with agreements to share services on things like vehicle maintenance, or perhaps even fire prevention, inspections, and investigations. So that's sort of a basic set of options that we think could be explored. A more advanced set would be to enhance your coordination of operations. So this speaks to enhancing your mutual aid framework by actually trying to formalize it in some respects. Putting it down on paper, what you're going to agree to in terms of how mutual aid is going to be utilized, and whether it might be utilized to a greater extent just for backup. When your station is experiencing a very, very busy call volume, instead of having to call in folks to man the station while others are out, would there be an agreement with one of the neighboring departments to instead provide that backup? Is just an example. Would you want to consider automatic aid agreements with any of your neighbors, and so forth? Are there opportunities to work with Tri-State to improve EMS response? Potentially by looking at even trying to give your department greater paramedic capability, or paramedic capability to begin with. But there are other options that we put out there in the report. And then sharing apparatus. Is there a need for several departments to have ladder trucks, for example? Could certain backup vehicles be shared? Might this be a way to improve efficiency? And also, to the extent that you're sharing apparatus, better coordinate your response. So that's our tier 2. Tier 3 are the advanced options. What we say in the report is that if indeed there is consensus among all of the departments that indeed substantial service enhancement should be pursued, really it's the tier 3 set of options that are the ones that ought to be looked at. The most basic of the tier 3 is station sharing, and that applies directly to you, and I'll comment on that in the next slide. But again, the notion of, to the extent that 2 communities are looking at having to build or replace a station in relatively close proximity, is there any merit in sharing that cost, just building or renovating one station and jointly staffing it, or otherwise jointly sharing it? Are there contracting opportunities? And this really does not apply to Onalaska, but to the Shelby and La Crescent departments to potentially contract with La Crosse for their fire and first response. And then finally, we did look at what a full single consolidated department to essentially represent a merger of the existing 5 departments might look like, and how that would function. So I just want to conclude by giving you just a little bit more detail on some of these options. What this is showing is essentially the station sharing concept. And of course, Onalaska has looked at the potential, and obviously you're not very far along, but potentially looking at some point needing a new station in the Valley View area. La Crosse has looked similarly at a station in that general geographical jurisdiction. And so that might be an opportunity to plan together and to look at some type of a station sharing agreement. We cite an example in the report. In Racine County, the South Shore Fire Department and the Caledonia Fire Department share a station on their border. So again, this wouldn't be unique, and it may be a possibility. There's also a possibility in the southern part of the region that doesn't impact your department, but La Crosse, as you know, has plans on the table to build a 5th station. Could that in some way replace or eliminate the need for Shelby to replace its station, or vice versa? Could La Crosse not build a new station and use the station, the Shelby station, to serve that part of La Crosse? In terms of now the full consolidation model, I just want to give you a few details. What we're envisioning would be a northern division and a southern division. The northern division would have 5 stations. It would be your current station and the current Holmen and La Crosse Station 4. There would be a new station built in the northern part of the Holmen area, and there would be the new Valley View Station. The number of full-time shifts to serve those 5 stations would grow from the existing 9 to 18. There would be 3 added at each of the new stations and 2 to the existing Holman area station. And also we would suggest that your station under a consolidated model add 1 full-time shift, as we call it, which essentially means another full-time firefighter / EMT who would be physically at the station on a 24/7 basis. There would be a separate southern division, and each of these divisions would have a battalion chief, which would have the existing lacrosse stations 1, 2, and 3, a new southern station, and the Greenfield and the Crescent stations would be maintained, but only with paid on-call staff. So you can see how the shifts would grow. Yes, there would be an added cost. This shows you just the map of where these stations would be located. In terms of some of the benefits of a consolidated department, you wouldn't have to worry about joint training because everybody would be trained to the same standards and protocols. You wouldn't have to worry about concepts like closest unit response because automatically, because municipal boundaries essentially wouldn't exist anymore, the response would be dispatched from the closest station, regardless of the municipality from which the call originated. You wouldn't have to worry about figuring out how to collaborate on things like fire prevention and inspections and so forth. These would be handled by the consolidated department. So there would be some efficiencies there. The ability to strategically deploy the resources among this large group of stations would also improve both with the effectiveness of both EMS and fire response, but also with efficiency. Again, there's a cost here. So we envision adding 5 full-time career shifts and 5 shifts to be staffed with paid on-premise part-time workers. You can see that the total cost would be about $2.4 million. On the command and administrative side, we think that this could be truncated from the current roster of positions, a reduction from 16 to 13. You put all of this together, we see some potential savings in apparatus and non-personnel costs. Our rough estimate of a consolidated department would be an additional cost of $2 million above what the 5 departments are collectively spending today. And you may look at that number and say, well, that's crazy. How can this region, given our property tax levy limits, given all of the other factors, afford that? And I'm not here to debate that point. But I think some very important context here is that if each of your departments were to try to really respond on your own to the potential service enhancements that have been discussed. And I'm not saying that all of this would happen next year or even 2 or 3 years from now, but let's say over the next 5 to 10 years, we project that cost for all of you doing it alone could approach about $2.8 million or about $800,000 more than I just showed you in the previous slide. So finally, just in conclusion, there's already a lot of cooperation and coordination. We see that as a plus and something that you might be able to build upon, potentially given the growing service demands and the paid on-call retention and recruitment issues. That set of enhanced service sharing options might be something to look at. It might also be a way to start to get on a road of greater collaboration that could lead to additional service sharing opportunities in the future. Conversely, you may want to start bigger and really look at some steps to further coordinate your operations through opportunities like formalized mutual aid agreements, potentially looking at closest unit response types of frameworks or even automatic aid. And finally, the advanced options could provide potentially even more potential benefit for service improvement while enhancing efficiency. End of the day, it's likely that each of the departments will need to increase spending soon. So I think our study bears out that it's a legitimate question to ask whether at least some of these desired improvements could be achieved at a lower cost and a higher level of service than could be achieved by acting alone. So I will stop there. I apologize if I took a little longer than I originally thought, but obviously we had a decent amount of ground to cover. So I'll be happy to answer any questions. If anyone's talking, I unfortunately cannot hear you. I am still not hearing you.
Rob,
I can hear you
Can you
now.
hear me?
Yes.
Never mind.
Mary Kim did ask if there was any questions in the room here. There are no questions at this point in time. I wanted to thank you for your time. Anything else you want to add, Kim?
Rob, can you hear me? I have one question.
Yep.
How are you guys, the forum here? How are you guys funded, or how does this work, and how did this come about?
So in terms of our organization, we have an annual budget of about $1.2 million, and about a third of our revenue comes from membership. So we're a membership organization. So we have members that include everyone from major corporations to universities, to local governments and school districts to nonprofits, and a pretty equal mix of those. So that's about a third. Another third is essentially coming from projects like this. So when we undertake a major project like this, we subsidize some of the costs through our membership dues, but we also have to ask for a supplement. So in this case, this study was supported by the county and the area planning committee. And then the remainder of our revenue comes from both event income. We do an event called the Salute to Local Government that you may have heard of, and have other events from our endowment earnings and from other miscellaneous sources. So that's essentially how we are funded, and we work very hard to maintain very diverse funding streams. If we were funded too much by the corporate side, people may assume, rightly or wrongly, that we skew right. If we were funded too much by certain foundations or nonprofits or governments or school districts themselves, maybe people would assume we skew left. So we try to maintain a wide diversity.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Eric, why don't you just continue on your section there, since I'm not being heard very well. Unless anyone
Right.
has-
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. And any other questions, feel free to email me or just let me know.
We will.
Thank you.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Okay, we can move on then with item B, discussion and possible action regarding short-term contract for HR services. Eric?
Right, included in the packet this evening, and there should have been hard copies submitted. Thank you, Amanda, for that, making the copies this evening. Or you do that? Sorry. Joanne, thank you for making copies this evening. Included in that, there's a vacancy in the Human Resources Department with the position. And before you then is a division of duties that I'm proposing that we include. There would have been a hard copy at the table when you arrived.
Yeah, it would have been sitting here, chair, we sat down.
Single sheet of paper. Oh, not
We have
that.
extras if anyone else needs another copy.
There should be one that just has my memo too. I didn't.
Do you have the memo, Stephen?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just do have one question to legal. On the agenda, we got a quote that People Soft Inc. and this is People First, and they are definitely two separate entities. We probably notice this and may take action on it. So that's referred to and discuss. No, we have to have a proper notice. We have to have a proper notice to the public of what we're talking about.
I mean, the fact is related to a short-term contract with community care services. And so what we're really telling people is what the contract that we're discussing, the services we provide to. And so we don't think it has any significant change related to this question, but it's not people software for people first. I don't know if people software.
That's a software for HR.
the inclusion of PeopleSoft in my memo, which is separate from the next item on the agenda, which is the contract, was typographical in error on my behalf. But I guess the question just needs to be answered is, does the typographical error preclude us from moving forward? My understanding, Amanda, you're saying that it would not, but I leave that to legal.
Then give me a minute and let's go ahead and enact the agenda.
Okay, we're gonna move on to item C, while the city attorney gathers your thoughts on that topic. Item C is review and consideration of stipends for additional duties due to HR director vacancies. Eric?
Thank you. So I'll get to that in a little second here. You'll see that the same typographical error occurs here in the memo. But there's a vacancy in the human resource director position. And in order to allocate the duties appropriately, to make sure they are all accomplished, we were directing what's on top of there, that I'll have general oversight of the department. Amy Hewitt in her position will report directly to me. As I listed here, the other places in tonight's agenda, I'm requesting the hiring of PeopleSoft, there's the error again, or other consultant for temporary and part-time professional provision of core HR responsibilities with a focus on recruiting. So for some of the issues, Amanda Jackson will be the primary contact. So any issues regarding our COVID issues, employment policies, employee relations, and discipline. Amy Hewitt will be the primary contact for payroll, time clock plus, safety and benefit questions. Stacy Wilk and Fred Bueller will be providing substantial assistance to Amy Hewitt in completing the front end of payroll. Shane Stoner will be assisting Amy Hewitt regarding Time Clock Plus, our timekeeping software. For employees who are not department heads and are temporarily assigned duties above and beyond the normal scope of their job descriptions, I request the following temporary stipends to be, the city has provided in the past for up to $500 per pay period to the following employees. Amy Hewitt for $275, Stacy Wilk for $150, and Shane Stoner for $75, equaling the $500. So the only request I have from the council is the stipend below.
I'll make a motion that we approve the stipend schedule as stated.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Knott, to approve the stipends as outlined in city administrator's memo of today's date. Is there any discussion? Alder Stevens?
I assume that the funding for the stipends to be paid will come from the vacancy.
Correct.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the stipends as described, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion is approved. We'll continue on with item 11, report from the planning manager. Item A is an update related to the request to extend the declaration of restrictions to apply the first edition to Elmwood Hills edition to the city of Alaska, reported by the register.
We already acted on it, just wanted to let you know that that's why there was a change we got from the planning commission.
Okay, that was for information only. It's been taken care of. It's under control. Item B is resolution 1-2021, which is a preliminary resolution to vacate and discontinue a portion of Century Place in the city of Onalaska, La Crosse County, Wisconsin. Katie?
Thank you, Mayor. We had another request to vacate and discontinue a portion of Century Place to allow for the multifamily development to occur in the area. They will be reconfiguring Century Place and dedicating the cul-de-sac back to the city at the end. So this is the first step in the process. We have a preliminary resolution. We will see it again with the final hearing in the upcoming months.
Thank you, Katie. Would someone like to make that motion?
Motion to approve resolution 1-2021.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Alder Diane Wolf, seconded by Alder Tom Smith to approve resolution 1-2021. Is there discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Resolution 1-2021 passes unanimously. Thank you, Katie. Okay, back to our item 10B, discussion and possible action regarding the short-term contract for human resource services with PeopleSoft Incorporated. Katie, or Amanda, do you have a ruling?
Yeah, I'm comfortable, as I said, we're really talking about short-term human resources services, probably more than the other specific vendors. I think we get adequate notice.
Okay. Thank you for checking into that, Amanda. We'll turn it back to Eric.
Actually, to a large degree, I think I'd rather refer to Amanda, who did most of the conversations on my behalf with the consultant. I started by saying the request is based on the need for core HR competencies. I think that would be a certified position. And in particular, the recruitment is something that the rate urged that keep proceeding on. This would not be a full-time position. It's not a temp staffing or temp to hire. It would be a highly rated professional in the area, likely retired, willing to come in as of Monday to make sure that the general operations of the HR department continues.
All right, well, I'll make a motion that we, as we hear this session, approve the short-term contract for human resources with People First HR Solutions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder Knopf. Further discussion? Okay, Amanda? The motion's on the floor.
I don't have a lot to add, and I also don't have a mic. So I'll try to knock it out. Is it fairly set forth? Contract where essentially as indicated you will be paying per hour. We think this will be fairly part-time. We don't know exactly how many hours, but we really want to make sure that recruitment and some of those core HR functions continue to move and that we're not delaying filling positions as a result of the vacancy. And so this would be somebody that could come in and help us with those kind of core HR duties, on an ongoing basis for the ones we need. And so whether that's a couple weeks or a little bit longer, this would give us the flexibility to make sure that we keep things moving. They are asking for $1,000 retainer, which they would then bill the $47 again per hour. Hours would be set by the city. The person has to probably be enough that they're willing to do it, but we would determine how many hours we needed. They would report to Eric and I. They do have a standard provision in there which we run into with any staffing type agency where obviously if you would hire this person, which is highly unlikely because as Eric mentioned in my understanding, this is likely a retired HR director, you would pay them placement fee. Again, I don't think that's ultimately applicable in this case. It was in the agreement, and really any agreement we've ever signed with any staffing type agency. But otherwise, it's a relatively straightforward matter.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. We'll start with Alder Burmaster and then we'll go to Alder Wolf.
I just have one question I was there for Amanda. Would this person be on site or at their office or a mix of both?
On site.
On site for all the hours that would be billable?
Yep.
Okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Wolf?
And that was my first question, thank you. And my second question is, has the city of Onalaska ever used them previously?
Not in my term here. I don't believe we've used this particular firm before. Their focus is on human resources, so
I don't remember that.
we haven't had the need.
I've never heard of them before.
Yeah, I haven't either. If I may ask, how did we come up with them? Amanda?
They were highly recommended by an organization that I know that use them. They have, their emphasis is in HR solutions, and so unlike kind of a general staffing agency, they're more HR focused. They also offer recruitment services and other like core HR functions that could be outsourced to them. We didn't want to outsource, we wanted to help internally to have somebody come in and be on site, which they also do here. I have to see, I don't know how old they are. Our contact was the former director of HR at Reinhardt. And so it's one of the managing partners and who we work with related to putting this contact. It seems very knowledgeable, and they seem very recommended.
There was this one info page.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Oh, yes, thank you.
And the gentleman that they're talking about, Ian here, I do know him. He's pretty good.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay, we do have a motion on the floor, and the motion is to move forward with a short-term contract for HR services with the People's First HR Solutions Group. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, I believe that concludes our printed agenda, unless someone yells that I missed something. Okay.
Second.
Motion by Alder Stevens, seconded by Alder. All those in favor, please say aye.